This lecture video is on modeling with quadratic equations. So basically it's word problems that will end up giving us quadratic equations to solve. In our first example, we have a rectangular sign that has an area of 21 square yards. It has a length that's 6 yards more than its width. We want to find the dimensions of the sign and round to the nearest yard if necessary. So whenever we can draw a picture, we should do that. And so we're given that the area of this sign is 21 square yards. And we're also told that its length is 6 yards more than its width. So its length is equal to 6 plus its width, or 6 plus w, and then this dimension would be its width. So the area formula is length times width. We know what the area is, it's 21, and the length is 6 plus w. Don't forget to put that in parentheses, and then times the width, which is just w. So now after you distribute this w, we're going to end up with a quadratic equation. 21 is equal to 6w plus w squared. And when we're solving quadratics, we always want to start out with 0 on one side, so we're going to subtract this 21 from both sides of our equation. And that will give us w squared plus 6w minus 21 equals 0. So I always like to check and see if this will factor, and this one won't factor. There's no way for us to factor negative 21 so that the sum will give us 6. We would have either positive 1 times negative 21 or the other way around, and that won't give us 6, or 3 times 7, and negative 3 and 7 is 4, and positive 3 and negative 7 is negative 4. So there's no way for us to get this 6. So that means we need to use the quadratic formula, which is negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So b for us is 6, so that'll give us negative 6 plus or minus the square root of 6 squared minus 4 times a, and a for this one is 1, the number in front of w squared, and then times c, which is negative 21. And then it's all over 2 times a, but our a is just 1, so we're just going to be dividing that by 2. So we have negative 6 plus or minus 36 plus 84, and this is all over 2. So add the 36 and the 84 together, and we get negative 6 plus or minus the square root of 120. And this is all over 2. And we're going to round this to the nearest yard if necessary. So we can just go ahead. You don't need to simplify this square root since we want it in decimal form anyways. So the square root of 120 gives us 10.95. So we have negative 6 plus or minus 10.95, and then divided by 2. And since we're considering a length, you don't need to consider this. There's really two solutions here. Negative 6 plus 10.95 divided by 2, and negative 6 minus 10.95 divided by 2. And this one we don't need to consider because it's negative. And all lengths are positive. So we're just going to compute this one. So if you type that into your calculator, negative 6 plus 10.95, and then divide that by 2. So we get 2.475. And if we're going to round to 1 yard, then that would give us 2. And so we have a width of 2. And then that would mean my length was equal to 8. So one thing that you might want to notice is that now if we go to compute our area is going to be off. And the reason that our area is off is because of the rounding that we did. So if we wouldn't have done any rounding, or at least not rounded that far and kept it out to 3 decimal places, then the area would be a lot closer. So 2.475 and then the length would have been 8.475. And so if we multiply those two together, it should be a lot closer than the 16 that we'll get if we multiply those two together. And so if we multiply these two together, we get 20.9756, which, if we were to round that to the nearest yard, would be correct. So just don't be worried about the fact that when you compute the area, it's going to be off. It's only off because we rounded. So in our next problem, the hypotenuse of a right triangle is 7 feet long. One leg of the triangle is 5 feet longer than the other leg. Find the perimeter of the triangle and then round to the nearest thousandths if necessary. So we have a right triangle, and the hypotenuse of the right triangle is 7 feet. And one leg is 5 feet longer than the other leg. So one of these is going to be x, and the other one is going to be x plus 5 because it's 5 feet longer than the other leg. So now we can use the Pythagorean Theorem to figure out how long each of these sides are. The Pythagorean Theorem, remember, is a squared plus b squared equals c squared, where a and b are the legs of your triangle. So we would have x squared plus the quantity x plus 5 squared equals 7 squared. Okay. So this is going to end up being a quadratic equation, so I want to simplify all of this. I have x squared plus, you need to do FOIL on the x plus 5, so do that over here on the side. X times x is x squared, x times 5 is 5x, and then 5 times x is another 5x, and then 5 times 5 is 25. So we have x squared plus 10x plus 25. And 7 squared is 49. So we have x squared plus x squared is 2x squared. And then we have plus 10x. And since we're solving a quadratic, we don't want to leave the 49 over here by itself. We want to bring it over with everything else. So subtract 49 from both sides. And 25 minus 49 gives us negative 24. So minus 24, and then that's equal to 0. So you might want to notice that all of these are divisible by 2, so that you can go ahead and factor out a 2 here. So we get 2 times the quantity x squared plus 5x minus 12. So it's a lot easier to see if this is going to factor with the 2 factored out, and it also gives us small numbers to plug into the quadratic formula if we need to use it. So can I factor 12 so the sum will give me 5? And the answer is no. 1 and 12, any combination of that won't give me 5. Also, 2 and 6 won't give me 5, and neither will 3 and 4. And those are the only ways for us to factor 12. So we will need to use the quadratic formula. So again, it's negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. B for us is 5, so we have negative 5 plus or minus the square root of 5 squared minus 4 times a, and a for us is 1, and then times c, which is negative 12. And then this is all over 2 times a, and a is 1. So that would just be divided by 2. And if you don't like this 2 sitting here, you could just divide everything by 2, and then the 2 will be gone. Because 0 divided by anything is 0. So computing this, we have negative 5 plus or minus the square root of 25, and then negative 4 times negative 12 is positive 48. And then this is being divided by 2. So we have negative 5 plus or minus, and 25 plus 48 gives us 73. And again, we don't need to consider the negative 5 minus the square root of 73 because that's going to be a negative result. And we're looking at a length, so we only want the positive one. So let's figure out what this is. So I'm going to take the square root of 73. That gives me 8.544. And then I need to subtract from that 5. And then divide that result by 2. And so I get 1.772. And the other side then would be add 5 to that, so that would be 6.772. And what we're looking for is the perimeter. And so the perimeter is going to be summing up all of those sides. So 1.772 plus 6.772 plus 7. So 1.772 plus 6.772 plus 7. And so we get 15.544. And again, you should write a sentence for every word problem you answer. And our last one here, the revenue for a small company is given by the quadratic function r of t equals 14t squared plus 16t plus 860, where t is the number of years since 1998 and r of t is in thousands of dollars. Find the year in which the company's revenue will be 1,290,000, and we're going to round this to the nearest year. So this is what we're going to plug in for r of t. 1290 equals 14t squared plus 16t plus 860. So we need to subtract this from both sides, because we need 0 on both sides of our equation before we can start solving this. So I have 14t squared plus 16t, and then it's going to be minus, and 860 minus 1290 gives me negative 430 equals 0. So we have 14 and 16. We could make our numbers a little bit smaller by dividing all of them by 2. That would be 7t squared plus 8t minus 215. And 0 divided by 2 is 0. So that's just like what we did before. You don't need to do that. You'll just have bigger numbers if you don't. So we have negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And I'm not even going to try to factor this one with a 7 in front of the t squared and a 215 out here. There's so many combinations that I'm not even going to try to guess and check to see if this will possibly factor. So b is 8. We'll have negative 8 plus or minus the square root of 8 squared minus 4 times a, and a here is 7, and then times c, which is negative 215. And then we're going to divide this all by 2 times a, which would give us 14. So we have negative 8 plus or minus 64 plus we have 4 times 7 times 215. And that gives us 6,020. And then all of this gets divided by 14. So we have negative 8 plus or minus the square root of 6,084. All of that being divided by 14. And what we're calculating is a year, and we don't want negative years, so again, we don't need to consider the negative root. We only need the negative 8 plus the square root of 6,084 divided by 14 number. So I'm going to find this square root. I actually get 78, so I have negative 8 plus or minus 78. Well, and we don't need to consider the negative one, so just plus 78 over 14. And so we get 70 over 14. which gives us 5. And so the revenue will be $1,290,000 in 5 years. And so that's the end of this lecture. If you have any questions, let me know. Thanks.